one more final, everybody. It's Deep Dive Zone, a Sonic review series for fans of all shapes and sizes. I'm your host, Evan, joined as always by my co-hosts Lauren and Bruce, and today we are extending our Sonic the Comic coverage just a little bit to something a little different, because Sonic the Comic ended in 2000, and then it reprinted all of its issues for like 3 years after that, which we'll see when we cover the covers of the stories that they just redid a bunch of stuff. But in 2003, right after it went out of print, fans who were unsatisfied with the original conclusion started a webcomic called Sonic the Comic.
It was right off the bat? Wow.
Yeah, Sonic the Comic Online. I mean, technically they could have been working on it as soon as they realized that it was just going to be reprints for the rest of the...
Sure, yeah. Oh, I get it. It came out right after the reprints. That's interesting.
Yeah. But they created Sonic the Comic Online to take their story in their own direction, and it is still running. After over 20 years, it is still getting new issues.
That is impressive.
Now, it's not very often.
No, but it's still happening.
I've read some of it, skimmed the whole thing, just to see if there was anything in these last two stories that is following up on stuff from online. There's not. But it's had a very prolific run, and it started a trend of Sonic fan continuations of dead continuities. You know, we have Archie Sonic Online, and I guess Sonic Eggs is a Sonic fan comic that sort of continues Sonic X, but not really.
Oh.
And that one's funny just because Tracy Yardley worked on it, and it's got Shadow in a dress. But importantly, staff from the original series have actually done work on Sonic the Comic Online.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, we are not going to be covering much of it, but importantly, there are two stories that Nigel Kitchen and Nigel Dobbin contributed to, and those are the stories we're looking at today. So we're starting here with In Memory, written by Nigel Kitching, drawn by Michael Corker, and I think the colors were by Dobbin. Which, can I just say, this guy has a very good handle on the Sonic the Comic art style.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks pretty nice.
Yep. So, years after the defeat of Super Sonic and Chaos, Sonic and Tails convene over a statue dedicated to the hero, Johnny Lightfoot. But a time portal brings new revelations they never could have expected. They built a statue of Johnny.
Makes sense, yeah.
Actually, Sonic says it's finally repaired, which means that it must have gotten destroyed at some point.
There, yeah.
But, hey, they'll get more than just that, as a time portal appears containing Sonic and Johnny.
Worse. I can see they can still write Sonic well here. I like this bit when Tails is like, that energy looks kind of familiar, and Sonic is like, you can recognize energy? You gotta be kidding.
Yeah. Well, and past Sonic is much the same way, as he says, Johnny, I think Kintober has really messed this up big time.
Still hating on Kintober.
I assume he means AI Kintober?
I would assume so.
He has to. It does not make any sense otherwise.
Yeah.
Also, he has blue eyes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And seeing his green-eyed self is how he deduces that he is indeed from the past. You'd think that with this being potential decades later, he'd be like, wow, you look old as shit. But no.
No, but hedgehogs don't age, apparently.
Yep. So present Sonic is shocked to see Johnny here and alive, and he tries to talk to him, but Tails is like, maybe that's a bad idea.
Yeah. Pretty much any interaction here could lead to some sort of paradox.
Yeah. He also lies when Johnny asks about the statue.
Of course.
I mean, yeah.
You could skip over this. You're like, well, you know, we really like you, Johnny, so we did it for
True,
fun.
Actually, they could have said, oh, it's to respect you. They don't have to specify why they're respecting him.
Well,
that would probably
you see later that there's a plaque that reveals what the statue's for.
Well, don't let him get close to it.
Well, we don't want to say anything too much, because that will mess up the timeline. But hey, past Sonic makes fun of present Sonic.
Yeah, it's really great how present Sonic is like, okay, guys, like, you know, you be careful and all that. And then past Sonic's like, wow, you're such a wimp.
Yeah, I like to see that, because this might be our best example of how much Sonic has grown as a character.
Well, and it's also funny because past Sonic makes fun of Johnny, which from his perspective is just some ribbing. But from our Sonic's perspective, it's like, you do not fucking talk about my friend that way.
Oh, yeah.
And it pisses off President Sonic so much as to attack himself.
Of course, it would end up going that way.
Yeah.
And it's very funny because Tails and Johnny they're not bothered by this.
I mean, it should be expected.
Yeah.
Actually, it helps because Tails is like, we need some sort of distraction because Johnny is getting too close to the statue.
Right. We need a distraction. All right, I'll punch myself in the mouth.
So it's like, oh, how convenient. I wanted to do this anyway. But Sonic blasts other Sonic into the statue and blows it to pieces. So we're going to have to repair it again, apparently.
Good job. Sonics and Tails already implied that they're going through some cash flow issues.
Yeah, which
Good
is
job,
weird.
Sonics.
Why would you guys not have all the money you could ever want for everything you've done?
Yeah,
Sometimes being a hero after the fact isn't always cracked up to be.
it's true.
Apparently.
It's not unrealistic.
Sonic calls himself a jerk, but Johnny finds the plaque from the statue that quite clearly says "Gone but never forgotten."
Yep.
So that has to be a shock.
Uh-oh, yeah.
Anyway, the time portal opens up again.
Yeah, and I see we're continuing the tradition of Sonic the Comic stories being way too short.
It's fine because
This length is
it's like an in-universe explanation because past Sonic is like,
right.
this is stupid. I hate this. Let's get out of here right now.
That's fair. I could have done with a couple more pages here, personally.
I think it's meant to be a little bit abrupt, just in the case of you don't want
guess.
Johnny and Sonic to have to talk about this too much.
Sure.
Because, spoiler alert, the Sonic we used to know never gets clued into this. Obviously, we didn't see it coming. But Johnny does talk to our present Sonic and tell him... We get a Shadow Generations moment, really. He's like, I'm not afraid of the future. Whatever happens, I will stand by my decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
And I do like that Kitching also makes sure to include past Sonic saying, none of this ever happened. We're never going to mention it again.
Honestly, I'll take that explanation. He's just like,
no, that's a
forget
good
about
enough
it. It didn't happen.
Yep. And yeah, they find the plaque and they're like, oh, did Johnny see this? And so, yeah, he knew that this was going to happen, which helps give Sonic and Tails closure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty cute little story.
Yeah.
Yeah, the story itself is fine.
It's very funny that 2 episodes ago we talked about how, like, oh, Johnny became the character defined by his death, and now the writing is doing that too.
And what are you going to do after they're dead?
Yeah.
But they promise they're going to rebuild the statue again, and Sonic says, and let's make sure this time to make it a really big one with the most manic expression I've ever seen. But, it's a nice little cap to that whole part of the character dynamic. I think it's pretty alright.
Yeah, I like it. Like I said, and this fits. I have to give credit. I could see this. I mean, minus the whole it's been a long time and we rebuilt the statue. If you took out the time problems, I could see this being a story that happened like a few stories after the last one in Sonic the Comic.
Yeah.
It fits.
Yeah, I feel like that story didn't really need the time skip at all.
Yep, I agree. I don't know why we bothered with that, but so that's neat. Let's move on to this other thing.
Oh boy.
We began this series with Enter Sonic, and now we exit this series with Exit Sonic. It's the same guys, Kitchen, Corker, and Dobbin. And what the fuck do I say about... What do I do for the summary here? Sonic does a Rise of Skywalker, maybe? I don't know. This thing is confusing. The story finishes. Yeah, we'll get into it. This one starts with a dedication from Kitchen himself, saying it's the last Sonic story he'll ever work on. You should have expected that 5 years later you'd collaborate on IDW Sonic, Nigel. You messed up.
Yeah, you should have assumed.
Did? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I knew he did. That'll be interesting.
But this is a big fan service comic. You'll have Grimer, you'll have Eggman, you'll have Super Sonic, you'll have the final defeat, whatever. I don't know. It's a thing.
It sure will be a thing.
Yeah.
Yes. We start with Sonic running in the desert when Tails stops him to warn him about not pushing himself because Sonic has some kind of ailment.
An ailment that will not become clear.
But yeah, already I feel like I'm missing context.
Sonic the Comic Online does not provide context for this. This is all kitching.
God damn it. Okay.
That's why I read it, or skimmed it, is because I wanted to see if there was something I was missing. There's not. It's just really confusing.
All right.
So, they they decide that Tails says Knuckles needs us back at the Emerald Chamber for the next part of the procedure. What does that mean? I don't know. But we hop in the plane.
You're not supposed to know.
Yeah.
Like, this is very much like, oh, they'll explain later in the story. The problem is they don't really very well.
Yes.
Not really, yeah.
We hop in the tornado, which is, I guess they never called it the tornado in this comic, but it's the plane. It's red. You know what it is.
It's the tornado.
Yeah.
So they head to the Emerald Chamber, where, oh my god, they have Robotnik prisoner here.
Huh.
Again, familiar. I feel like we're jumping the gun.
Yeah. When did this? I guess they could have done that after the adventure arc.
Yeah, they could have just thrown him in jail after that. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah.
Although imprisoning him on Angel Island, I don't know about that.
In the Emerald Chamber, no less.
Yeah, odd choice.
He also says, "How did I even get here?" Which is interesting. Have they got him in some kind of stasis?
Right. I mean, they do actually explain that later.
They do, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Knuckles is pressing a button on a remote and saying, we've had enough of that. And Amy says he thinks he's still in power, so don't know what's going on with that one. But yes, Amy and Lewis are here too, and I want to note that Lewis asks, "How's Johnny?" And it's like, what? What? For a second I was like, what are we doing with this? But no, as it turns out, we learn from Sonic and his arrival that Amy and Tekno are an item, and they adopted a child. Fucking canon, bitches. Canon.
Good. Amazing.
Yeah.
Tekno isn't in this story, I might add. Kitching still didn't put her in the comic.
I didn't think about that, and that's really funny, because this is supposed to be like a send-off comic. Why didn't they include Tekno? Oops.
Or Short Fuse.
I mean,
Shorty... That's true.
Admittedly, we did point out Tekno's actual contributions to the comics are fairly limited.
Well, I think it's
you mentioned here, here.
That's true, and she is a fan favorite. So
I think it's just that Kitching doesn't want to step on Stringer's properties too much, because I went and I looked up, which artist did it, or which writer did what, and by and large, they mostly didn't touch each other's stuff too much.
That's interesting.
Interesting. Okay.
Huh.
Anywho, so the situation with Robotnik and all this, it is just kind of jury-rigged from not that much time, so that's part of the reason that he's being kept here like this.
Right.
They didn't just have him here for years.
Yeah, that's true.
So what we learn is that recently the Emeralds were giving off crazy amounts of power, so Knuckles, purged them with this switch. He says, I need to eject the contamination.
Okay.
And out popped Robotnik.
For everything on Angel Island. Yeah, so he just suddenly appeared, so okay.
There is never a point in original Sonic the comic or in online where Robotnik gets absorbed into the Emeralds.
No, but Amy does mention something about the Chaos Vortex.
Yeah.
Which again,
know what that is.
Another thing I feel like I'm missing context on.
So I kind of assumed that after Supersonic and Perfect Chaos merged or something, it sent Sonic or sent Robotnik into the Chaos Vortex. I thought that was the idea.
Maybe something like that. You should have had Chaos eat him. That's what I would have done.
Yeah, that's what worked.
But yes, Lewis says he was drawn to the Emeralds because Robotnik is a manifestation of Chaos energy. Because he's basically Robotnik's version of Supersonic.
I didn't think about that. But you're right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's because they should have been treating the two sort of similarly from the start. They treat Supersonic, when he's part of Sonic, as, a problem that Sonic has, or a dangerous thing that is ailing him. They never do that with Robotnik. They never even acknowledge Kintober for the most part.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, Robotnik effortlessly escapes from captivity.
Yeah, and he pulls out a gun, too, which is kind of weird. He doesn't really use firearms in these comics.
Yeah, he's got that thing on him.
And remember that really old story where Robotnik had a homing device in his tooth?
No.
I did, actually. That was a kind of funny callback.
That was the first Knuckles comic, right?
Yep.
Okay.
That's how Knuckles broke him out.
I mean, that is what Robotnik says here.
That's why Sonic says
this
last
page.
time he directed at Knuckles. That's not last time. That was the first time, but whatever.
Yeah.
Because he used that tooth to contact his good old buddy Grimer.
Don't sound so excited. This doesn't follow. Dude quit.
It does. Yeah, that mean I'm like, he quit.
No. Listen, look, he says, did you like my act? You didn't really think I was insane. It was all part of the plan.
Yeah, but Grimer still quit.
So, first of all, even if that does mean what you think it means, that is so dumb.
Oh, it's incredibly stupid.
But that's not actually what he means. He means, did you all think that I thought I was still the ruler of Mobius?
Right. That's
crazy.
what
He's not referring to why Grimer is with him now. He's referring to his act before. He's saying, I had it all together. Yeah,
Robotnik was acting like he was crazy.
That's correct.
They actually do not attempt to explain why Grimer is with him. They just act like that's how it works, which
is like
ignoring the plot.
Well, maybe the fact that he contacted him, he's like, I've got my drive back, I'm gonna reconquer Mobius, and Grimer was like, great, this is what I've been waiting for. I knew you'd come back eventually. I don't know.
I guess.
That's
it's dumb. It's dumb.
Yeah.
And don't worry, it gets dumber.
It does get dumber.
Oh, it does. That's you think that is a continuity screw up?
That's the minimum continuity screw up.
They didn't just come back alone. They brought back an old friend, Supersonic. What?
How the fuck are we pulling this off?
The entire last story was that they re-merged Super with Sonic.
Yeah.
And in Sonic the Comic Online, there's never a part where they split apart again. I don't think so, at least.
So, I don't
How do you? That's the thing they did at the very end. I'm just even more confused. Like how they forgot that. That's like the whole point of the. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So anyway, Sonic's weird condition. They've got this emerald dialysis machine that I guess is meant to treat that illness. But Super's like, you don't need that. I'll destroy it by blasting you with energy.
Yeah.
When I first read this, when they kept talking about Sonic having a mysterious condition, I assumed that was Supersonic, like they were trying to treat him for it.
Sure.
But clearly that's not what happened.
No.
Yeah.
So, Porker is getting ready to bring up the Emerald Force Field, and Knuckles punches Supersonic into the Emerald Chamber, and he puts up the Force Field so that he's trapped in there.
Fair enough, okay, yeah.
And apparently, Supersonic destroyed that machine, but didn't destroy it enough. So they hook Sonic up while Amy kicks the shit out of Robotnik.
Heck yeah.
Actually, she kicks the gun out of his hand and points it at him, but I like to imagine she's just also kicking him.
Yeah.
I mean, she's kicking his hand, at least.
She has already done more than she did in the last final battle.
That's true.
But Supersonic is still going to kill them, but Robotnik gets so overzealous at proclaiming their doom that Supersonic turns around and just blasts him and Grimer.
All right.
Well, he kills Grimer.
He just straight up killed him.
Alive, though.
Yeah, Grimer is dead, Robotnik is hanging on.
Yeah, Grimer, you can see Grimer must have jumped in front of Robotnik.
Oh, I can see that. Also, he died saving his master.
Yeah, to be fair, it doesn't sound like he did a very good job because Robotnik's on the verge of being dead.
Okay, so, the thing is, this would have made sense, but, again, you're ignoring the arc of Grimer gradually losing hope in Robotnik. So, this I don't like this. I would have preferred Grimer not being in the story.
Yeah,
because, there's a reason for him to be in the story.
Yeah, there was really no purpose for Grimer.
If you were just going to kill him at the end anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Supersonic is about to kill everyone, but Lewis activates the machine with Sonic, and Super dissolves him? Sonic disappears again, just like before.
Yeah, but before we go there's something I need to touch on, because I'm just in a mood where I have to complain and nitpick everything.
That's fair.
So, there's a moment here that's supposed to be thoughtful, profound, or something, where Supersonic is like, it's funny. I never really understood why I hate you so much, Sonic. I just kind of do. I'll have to think about it. But, I thought it was pretty clear that he wanted to kill Sonic because he wanted to be free from him. He literally said that in one of the stories. Mm-hmm. And, he just doesn't like being forced away. He thinks he's better than Sonic in every way, and he has to kill him so that he can be the one true Sonic, basically. That's what I was getting.
Yeah, and that seems pretty consistent to me, so I don't know what Kitching was doing between the end of the original run and these stories, And I want to say, like, did you just get out of practice? But the thing
Feels
is,
a little like that.
there was none of these problems with the Johnny time travel story. That one was perfectly
No.
succinct.
True.
Yeah.
So-
It feels like this one was purely written from a fan service standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, Sonic dissolves just like before, so he's gone. There's only Supersonic now. And then Amy starts talking to Lewis about something we didn't know about, Sonic's last wish.
Okay.
Because apparently the Emerald Dialysis machine doesn't treat Sonic. It siphons his chaos energy into the emeralds, but also makes him sick.
Okay.
I don't understand.
No, neither do I.
Why
At
do you
this
need to
point in
remove-
reading this, I was completely lost.
Yeah, like this is supposed to be the explanation moment, but the explanation actually confused me more.
Yeah. And don't worry, the confusion doesn't stop because they say, oh, it siphons his energy in the emeralds, but it also makes him sick. Well, I could have told you that, says Kintober. Kintober!
Yeah, Kintober's just here.
Okay, they hooked him up to the other end of the machine, but
Yeah,
Right,
that makes
yeah.
enough sense.
Yeah, they just didn't show that happening.
so I understand. So they talk about siphoning Sonic's chaos energy into the emeralds. So in a way,
Mhm.
that is treating Supersonic from him because that's in chaos energy. But where the fuck does this other Supersonic come from?
Yeah, so they were
Yeah.
so close to making sense. If they had just made it that the treatment removed Supersonic and then they were separated again, and that's why
Right.
Supersonic is separate, it would have made sense,
Sure.
but that wasn't what was going on.
Or perhaps you follow up on the time travel thing from last time, and maybe that's where this Supersonic comes from or something.
Yeah?
Sure.
Maybe that's
I
where this
guess,
grinder
yeah.
comes from, so that makes more sense. Just time travel everything.
Oh, God.
I mean, no, but at least it explains.
It does explain, just in, like, the laziest way possible.
Yeah. But yes, it's the suck the chaos energy out of you machine. So they used it on Sonic, and then they used it on Kintober. So Kintober's back, and he finally meets everybody after all this time. And then Supersonic powers back down into regular Sonic? What do you mean?
It's the exact same ending.
Yeah, they just refused again.
Yeah, no,
So why'd you separate them?
immediately, I'm like, my notes even point out, this is literally basically the exact same ending again.
Yeah.
Sort of.
But it's like we
In that other ending, you didn't have Robotnik just turn into
No,
Kintober.
the
You didn't have
Kintober part
Grimer
is
just
new.
die.
No, so that stuff is all new.
Well, and that part's fine. I don't mind that it
Yeah.
would end with bringing Kintober
No,
back.
that's fine. It's just rehashing the same big moments
Yeah.
is just lame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Lewis and Kintober, they techno-babble their way to explain all of this, and it still doesn't really make any sense. I'm looking at this, and it says, you see, the thing you have to always remember is this. At the end of the day, there was never actually any such person as Supersonic. So,
Right.
I guess the implication is that you can literally never destroy Sonic as long as Supersonic exists. It will just become regular Sonic? That still doesn't explain where this one came from. I don't know.
No, it doesn't.
It really doesn't.
But we all pose with all the characters, except this time Kintober and Lewis are there. And then we do a final epilogue. We end on a final coda with AI Robotnik? What?
Okay, this is actually hilarious, though.
I like the
It is
idea of AI
hilarious.
Robotnik, but it makes absolutely no sense why he's an AI.
We switched out
Well,
AI
it's
Kintober
pretty-
for that, apparently.
Yeah,
His consciousness was originally copied onto like a ring by chance, so I could
Yeah.
see his consciousness was just like copied into the computer nearby. Because they did say that the computer in the narration box has moved to Angel Island. So I could see a freak accident once makes AI Kintober, a freak accident makes AI Robotnik. That's fine. And I'll totally give it a pass because it's hilarious.
Yes, and I do like this final sequence where he's just raging and raving at him, and then Kintober just, like, despondently points at himself and then turns the computer off and then walks away.
In the last frame, he looks a little bit like Nigel Thornberry.
He does. So what the fuck was that?
So I did a little looking up while we were talking about this. This was written basically as Kitching's way to end off his Sonic.
Yeah.
But apparently the online editors have said that might be a future that they do consider canon, but
so
it's
I guess
not
they'll build to
written.
that eventually.
I guess, but Kitching didn't write it to be canon to Sonic the Comic Online.
That's all right.
Supposedly.
They can finagle their continuity however they like, but
I mean, sure, yeah.
yeah, what a confusing thing. Like I get what they're going for, right? You know, because they want a big fight. You know, we bring back the most important villains. We finally get rid of Robotnik, Kintober, and frankly, Robotnik and Kintober, I don't have that big of an issue with in this story.
No, they're like kind of non-issues.
It's Grimer and Supersonic that don't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
don't
don't
feel like it follows. It feels like they reversed a whole bunch of stuff to
it feels
make
like
the ending again.
Yeah, exactly. It just feels like oh, I want to do something to finish off my Sonic.
It's a sitcom reunion special.
Ending. Yes.
Kinda.
Yes.
You got old ass Ted Danson still working at that same bar. So you tried
That was
to correct one
extremely
bad
well
ending and you
well
made a
done.
worse ending.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Let's be fair. However, I shouldn't be overly negative. It is awesome that he would put a story together after all this time.
Oh,
Like,
sure, yeah.
Like, that is really cool.
Yeah,
I
that's
shouldn't be
cool.
mad for making a story like this. This is
Yeah.
Sure.
And frankly, the Sonic
Cool
and
thing to
Johnny
make.
story was perfectly good, and that actually
The Sonic and Johnny
That's
story
true.
was fine.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
great.
So, what to say about Sonic the comic?
It exists.
I think that even with these stories that we don't consider great, when Sonic the comic keeps things moving, it's always interesting. It's always cool.
Sure, yeah.
Right, when it's actually going somewhere. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when it's actually doing something, it's neat.
And it's like, I don't know if we could, this might be something to say for the end of the adventure. It's like, I was wondering, can we do like an Archie versus Fleetway thing? And maybe we could, but it is such a weird, different flavor that it doesn't even feel comparable.
Yeah, I was about to say it doesn't really feel fair.
Yeah, that's it. We could compare them. I don't really want to.
Yeah, just because it is radically different. Sonic himself is so different. It's and not just in Dickhead Sonic, but just in there's this last page of this where Kitching talks about his work on the story from the ending. He talks about how I want this Sonic to be taken seriously. And I want him to be a flawed character. And I think that's interesting because it mostly comes across as a joke for one thing, but. I do think that ultimately Sonic the Comic does tend to hit a really interesting tone, at least during its plot-oriented moments.
Sure. Well, it's funny that he mentioned that he wants Sonic the Comic Sonic to be a flawed character because for people that have not read the comic, a lot of people seem to believe that this is the worst Sonic.
It's funny. I was just thinking in my mind, and I was like, I might actually like Sonic the Comic Sonic as one of the best Sonics.
No, I think he's the most interesting Sonic, or one of the most interesting Sonics.
I'd have to think about it to be sure about that. It's possible.
Yeah, same. He's definitely up there, but I think because of that, people see the only stuff that ever gets posted about this comic online are the asshole Sonic panels, and that's all that most people ever talk about. So they don't see the fact that he's a flawed character. They just see, Sonic. That was my impression of him going into this comic.
Well, and importantly, they don't see the growth that he undergoes.
Exactly.
I do think that it was annoying early on, and I think that as it got more sporadic, it got weirder, but it also became more tolerable as a personality for Sonic. And Sonic, he almost comes across as sort of a reluctant hero archetype because he always.
Sometimes, yeah.
He always seems like really tired.
Yeah.
Like in a like, why is this still going on kind of way? Why do I still have to deal this kind of way? Which is different from like Sonic Boom Sonic, who seems really tired because he hasn't had his fucking morning coffee. Yeah, and yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff with this. He also mentions, they had a big meeting where they decided, all right, we're 9 issues in. This story is going nowhere. We need to make Robotnik the dictator of Mobius. And that's one thing. I think that is probably... I have to think that compared to Archie, this is maybe the best portrayal of Robotnik as a ruler of a society rather than just a bunch of robots.
Yeah.
I suppose. I don't know.
To me, Archie Robotnik never really felt like he was running Mobius.
That's the thing. And maybe I'm biased by the way Archie and Sat AM does it, but I was just not convinced, really. It just seemed like he just kind of scared people into submission and messed around with them sometimes when he felt like it. But, I mean, there were so many places where Robotnik wasn't even involved at all. And not for lack of, like, they're resisting him, but just because he didn't seem to care. It was kind of weird, honestly, the way they did that in these comics.
I guess, I think for me, it's just that, like, life on Sat AM Mobius is literally just a constant crisis situation. They're literally just hiding from him the entire time. This is one where you have to deal with the fact that you live in a society and the person in charge is a monster. Which is, I guess I'm just thinking of that because it's more analogous to real fucking life.
Yeah, I did think about it for a minute, and it's true that it does feel somewhat realistic. But the thing is, Robotnik's not a realistic character, and it just doesn't seem in keeping with the way I would think he would work. I can only see him being in a constant struggle, or just being completely on top. I can't see this weird middle ground where he just kind of, like I said, messes around with people sometimes and seemingly is content with leaving them to their own devices a lot of the time.
Yeah. Kitching did echo one thing we all basically agreed on, which is that the longer a Sonic the Comic story is, the better it probably is going to be.
Yeah.
100%.
He said that he didn't like working on the short one-shots, and good news, because we didn't like reading them.
Yeah.
Yep.
I am absolutely on his side that he said that the one where Porker has to leave the team is the best one-shot.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But he also throws some compliments toward, Short Fuse and Metamorphia, which were both Stringer.
Right.
And he knows we're all fans of Brutus. We're all Brutus stands up in here. That was good work by Stringer.
That was, yeah.
I actually made a big table where I noted which was Stringer and which was Kitching. I noted both the Zone Runner stories and the Badnik Technician stories from Mark Isles. He was batting 0.
Gosh.
Damn.
But most of the SA1 arc was really, really good. They clearly had so much more freedom with that plot line.
Yeah. It's nice to see an adaptation where they're not forced into it.
Yeah.
And really, as far as game adaptations go, these ones blow Archie out of the fucking water, don't they?
For the most part,
what game adaptations did we do across Sonic the Comic again?
Sonic CD.
3, Sonic CD, Sonic 3.
So that gave us Metallics, and I guess the Brotherhood of Metallics don't really count, but the initial Sonic CD story was not bad to begin with. And we did Sonic 3, and the Sonic 3 story was pretty great. They split it up between Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles, but both of them were good.
Sure. And then they also did 3D Blast.
Yeah, which is funny because that was the one that got completely sidetracked by Dracon.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That. I think that was when they started to do like interesting things with their adaptations. Like, we don't have to play this completely straight.
Yeah, it's a shame because Archie seemed to clearly feel like they needed to do things as straight as possible.
Yeah,
I mean, their adventure arc, was trying so hard to be faithful in a continuity that absolutely did not support it.
Yeah,
exactly.
This one's like Kitching even mentions like they realized, we should probably adapt Sonic Adventure, but we still want to do our own thing.
It felt so natural too, honestly.
It really did.
They weaved everything together.
It flowed together surprisingly well.
It makes the Dracon into one of the things I would most like to see incorporated into main canon, honestly.
I wouldn't mind seeing the Dracon. I think that could be interesting.
Like I was saying, it was actually an improvement to have the Dracons being the people the echidnas fight against. Because in actual SA1, there's really no explanation for who they're fighting.
Yeah, well,
main canon still doesn't have anything with that now that Chronicles got decanonized.
Yeah, and Devin even said it's just random echidna tribe, or seemingly at least.
Yeah, well, in SA1 they don't even say that. It could be literally anything.
I mean, it could be the cats.
Yeah. No. Here we do it. 4-way war between the Dracon, the Metarex, the Zorda, and the Black Arms.
God.
I said improvement. I didn't say mess.
I said
It
improvement.
wouldn't
I didn't
be
say
that bad. It would
peak.
just be your average sci-fi space story. You don't even feature any Sonic characters.
Nah. That.
I do think that generally Kitching was probably the better writer over Stringer, just because Stringer got
I think
stuck with
so.
most of the Tails and Amy stories.
Yeah.
I still don't know if he was mandated to make them that short, but he did most of the time zone stories. He did do the Earth stuff, which was at least more serialized.
Yeah.
It is interesting how these comics. I kind of forgot how meandering these comics were at the end before Adventure, but then I just remembered. Yeah, they seemingly ran out of ideas for a while, but they really pulled it through at the end.
Yeah, I struggle to wonder whether what the worst era of Sonic the Comic is. It still feels like the point where they were just killing time in the special zone before the big defeat.
So
for
bad.
Robotnik.
Yeah.
I hated that. The special. Okay, so like, if I had to rank like original Sonic the Comic concepts, the way they handled the special zone is like it's like probably at the bottom.
Yeah.
I think that if they just kept to a single few ideas and made it feel like a developed world rather than just random shit.
That's the thing. It's just their wild card. They do whatever they want with it.
Yeah, and then Time Zone just replaced it, along with the Ring of Eternity, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. The Ring of Eternity was a little bit better because at least I was like, okay, there's going to be an end to this. Whereas Special Zone is like, no, it's just whatever, who cares?
Well, and it's just like there's just very little established about the Special Zone. New Tech City is not a setting with any kind of consistency. If you had that it was always about dealing with Sidewinder and his gang, that would be something maybe.
Yeah, I actually like Sidewinder's gang. It's a shame they weren't featured more in the Special Zone.
And frankly, even during that entire arc, the arc with Knuckles on the flip side of that, back on Mobius, that part's actually fine.
Yes, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it went on a little long, but his travels, especially the fact that it all stemmed from exploits with Captain Plunder. I know that Lauren's waiting to talk about him.
Yes. When it comes to Sonic the Comic original characters, Plunder might be the best of them. Normally when a continuity is like so confident in an original character that they would feature them as the lead of a story, I would get annoyed because I'm like, oh wow, you're basically just doing your own comic. But with Plunder, I don't care. I'll read Plunder comics that have nothing to do with Sonic.
I'd read honestly, Plunder would work out well as the main character of his own comic series. He's not particularly he doesn't have to be bound to Sonic by the hip.
Just do these bumbling pirate stories, because Plunder is funny because he's amoral, but he's also kind of just silly and not the most competent. But then you've got Filch, who is much more competent, but you have the dynamic of he's a ghost and Plunder killed him, but he's still dedicated to his job. And then you have Simpson, who is literally just a Fleischer era cartoon character.
It's a great combination.
Frankly, I wish that Simpson had more to do because he was funny.
Fair.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't perfect.
No,
Simpson was great in their introduction, but it's true they kind of pushed him to the side after that. Obviously, it was an absolute crime what they did to Plunder at the end, and then just wrote them out of the comic for some reason. Why did Plunder just disappear?
Yeah, they just stopped using Plunder.
They torture him with bad luck, have him get blown up by some other sky pirate, and they just didn't make more Plunder stories. I guess maybe they were just not that popular. I would, even though we liked them, I could see them not being popular.
No, that's likely what the problem was. Unfortunately, these comics like this always have to play off of what was popular.
Yeah.
Right.
And generally, if it doesn't have Sonic in it, it's probably not going to be popular.
I really enjoyed the Plunder crossover stories, if you will, though. Like the one in Sandopolis where Plunder just derailed the plot and Knuckles and Sonic were like, "Oh my gosh, we're doing this now." It was hilarious. If they just had to keep doing that, that'd be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah.
He feels like he would be right in place in like Mega Man Legends or something.
He does feel like a Legends character. Well, I think it's the Sky Pirate aspect that helps.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that he could be right at home with the Bond family.
They just call him Plunder Bond or something.
I didn't mean make him a part of the... Anyway. So, yeah, and how do we feel about Sonic the Comics' original team members, that being Johnny, Shorty, Tekno, and Lewis? How would we rank these, I guess is my question.
Interesting.
Probably Shorty and Lewis towards the top for me, and then
Yeah, they're definitely at the top.
Johnny
Lewis has
and
the best
Tekno.
character arc. Short Fuse has the most versatility.
And for me, at least, Johnny and Tekno are mid. They're not bad. They're just kind of... They don't do a whole lot with either of them until Johnny fucking dies.
Neither of them are hateable.
No.
But they don't have much personality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I sentenced one of you to death and the other to gay.
God.
Gosh. Yeah, I'd say overall they succeeded at making some cool original characters for the team.
Yeah, I don't think any of the original characters are bad at all. I think
I'm
that's
just thinking
the main
about how
thing.
like we don't like Jeffrey St. John for how much he fucking appeared in Archie.
Yes, they didn't make a Jeffrey.
Yes.
Or any of the myriad freedom fighter groups that just don't matter.
Everyone's favorite, the 40 Fathoms Freedom Fighters. I don't even remember if I said that right.
No, you said it right.
Okay.
And I think this is my ultimate conclusion, is that when it's not throwaway bullshit, Sonic the Comic succeeds because it's focused.
Sure. The problem is a lot of it is throwaway bullshit.
But there's such a dividing line between focused and unfocused stuff that you really could make just a cut of
You
this.
could cut out. Yeah, you could cut out basically everything, or not everything. You could easily cut out the unfocused bullshit, and it wouldn't really change anything.
You can't do that with Archie, and that's part of what we like about Archie is that, like, if you skip the story with the spawn mower, you may be lacking context for something else or something.
Yeah, because Archie loves to bring up something from like 100 issues ago.
Yeah, and so it's like this push and pull, because it's like, on the one hand, if you strip all that stuff out of Sonic the Comic, it blows a lot of Archie out of the water in terms of consistency.
Oh god, yes.
But if you take that quality away from Archie, a lot of it is way less interesting.
Well, yeah, because it with Archie, to me, it reminds me a lot of Dragon Ball Z. A lot of people will complain about the filler, but then also in the same sentence say that it's some of their favorite parts of DBZ, and they'll complain when you remove it.
Yeah, and that's One Piece fans are even worse about that, because like the One Piece fan edit, where people are like, no, but I have to watch the longer version of the show. It's more story, and then the story is just fucking Luffy and Kaido staring at each other for 10 minutes an episode. Anyway, sorry, I get really heated about this.
It's not like that's off topic though. That's fair to bring up.
But on the subject of consistency, I will say Sonic Comic far and away more consistently good artwork than Archie.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's only one, maybe two artists that I can't remember their names, but I remember their art styles that I didn't like. The rest of them, quite good.
Yeah, so Elson is obviously, he was the top contributor, and his art is stellar. It's very unique. It's very not what you expect Sonic to look like, but it's so polished,
Yeah.
And then it's Dobbin and Flint. So they were both the, decent-ish artists. They could make things look all right. And Corona was up there as well as all right. They were actually pretty similar. I could tell which was which a lot of the time. But then you had McMahon. And it was so funny to me how his art style became synonymous with not caring about what's happening in the story.
A lot of his stories ended up just being me just kind of skimming them. Because the plot never really mattered, and the art was just kind of unpleasant to look at.
It's so weird, so flat.
One of us mentioned it looks like like stained glass.
Yeah, you said that, and I think it's an apt comparison.
Yeah, I can't remember if I had said that. Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, it's bizarre how like all their stories are bad stories, pretty much. I think there might be one or two that are decent.
Yeah.
So like I can't be like unbiased, and so I can't say like, oh, the art's not great. I mean, it's certainly not as good as those other artists. I don't know. It's a certain
yeah, that's the thing. So I don't want to call him incompetent, because he's clearly drawing that way on purpose.
Right. It's just a style.
It actually looks fine in a lot of frames, but in other frames, it does look kind of weird.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of it's just a style that is not appealing to everyone.
I would definitely have traded it for let's see, Mike Hadley and Jose Casanovas. Both were early artists on the series, and they both had a lot of detail. Hadley, in particular, looked really similar to Elson a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I wish that they had gotten to develop their styles over the comic instead of leaving early.
Yeah.
But overall, Sonic the Comic looks good, and sometimes reads good.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if you were to cut it down, get rid of all the filler shit, it would end up. You could probably read through all this in like a week.
Probably. And it would be a solid experience. Even for the bad parts of the main plot, they're at least interesting.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I am also happy to be done with it because we didn't do that, working through this got pretty tiring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that there's anything we could do for 30 weeks in a row that wouldn't get tiring.
Probably.
Yeah.
I guess we'll have to see come the Flynn era.
Oh boy.
Oh boy, yeah.
You say that with premonition. I'm excited. I think those comics are great.
I'm sure they're good, but it's going to be a lot of comics.
I think it won't be any longer than our first Archie arc, actually.
Our first Archie arc by the end felt like it was dragging along.
Exactly.
That is also true. Well, if we start to feel fatigued, maybe we'll take a break. Maybe that'll be the solution.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
And that is the case because... Actually, let me just make sure. Is there anything else you guys wanted to say about SEC before we're done?
I mean, the thing, there's a lot I could say about it, but we've been going on for a while already. And it's like, man, I'm just thinking back through this series. You can talk about like how they handled Badniks. It was interesting. After a while, they stopped doing Badniks having like organic batteries, and like it would be interesting to compare like how they did Robotnik's sidekick, because that's something that they do in a lot of different continuities.
Oh yeah, sidekick off. We have to compare Grimer versus Snively versus Sleeton Dingo versus Scratch and Grounder versus
technically Orbot and Cubot, but we haven't gone to them yet.
Yeah, but they're more like Statler and Waldorf.
When we rank the versions of characters, which we're thinking about doing at some point, we should also rank like equivalents like that.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, Ancient Stone would actually be very high.
Oh yes, Stone is definitely up there. Anyway,
and yeah,
but
there is still a lot to say. We didn't talk about how Cyberniks were sort of a interesting discussion on Badniks as well.
True.
Yeah. I mean, we could sit here for 3 hours talking about these comics, just like we could have done with Archie. Or both eras of Archie we've covered so far, but at some point we need to stop.
Yes, indeed. So, it's been fun, but we are indeed finished with Sonic the Comic, and that means that we're finished with the Adventure Era coverage for the series.
Holy crap.
Wow. Next time on Deep Dive Zone, we will be covering... Well, at some point we'll do a bonus episode covering the covers of Sonic the Comic, because we didn't talk about those, but the next mainline episode will be our final goodbye to the Adventure Era of Sonic, which is like a lot more material than it was really meant to be, because obviously this covered the Sonic comics spanned the entire classic era, obviously.
Right.
Also took us like 2 years to get through all of this, so we're gonna have to gather.
Oh my god, it's been 2 years.
Something like that. Actually, now that I'm saying it, I'm not sure that's correct.
It's got to be close. Anyway,
whatever. I'll flash it up on screen. It's been that long. But with all that said, that is where we are going to close off for tonight. Thank you to Bruce and Lauren, my co-hosts, for going on this journey with me. And thank you to our viewers for watching this video. If you like this video, please feel free to share, like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any questions, comments, criticisms, suggestions for the future, or feedback on this video, or other videos, I suppose, you can contact us at any of the links in the link tree in the description. I hope you have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next week for the cap to all this. I hope you have a great rest of your night, and take care.